Thanks for that introduction, and thanks for the organizers and the trustees for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate Cindy giving me a good introduction here for what I'm going to talk about. I don't have any conflicts to disclose. Most of my funding comes from NIH or the University of Colorado. I'll start off by saying obesity is a big problem. They now outnumber lean people. And obesity affects every organ and tissue in the body in a pathological way, such that there is a very enormous healthcare burden associated with this problem. And there's additional consequences in social stigmatization, discrimination, and reduced quality of life. Obesity is changing the way that we live. Now, this might seem absurd to you, but this was a reality for my mother. She was obese, she had problems with her knees, and she couldn't walk the dog, so she drove the dog. Obesity is affecting how we live, and like many other people, my mom tried to lose weight on a number of different programs, and she was successful. But like many other people, she saw the weight return. This is a meta-analysis of U.S. weight loss studies looking at the percent of lost weight that's regained in the years following a weight loss program. A lot of the weight comes back early on and most eventually returns. Why is this a big problem? This has really emerged as one of the biggest problems in obesity therapeutics, and the reasons why we regain weight seem to be very complicated and confusing. And what I hope to do for you today is tell you about one approach, how we have tried to systematically approach and tackle this problem in a stepwise fashion. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is the pressures that affect body weight. That'll help us frame the discussion for discussing the barriers and challenges to weight loss and weight loss maintenance. And then I'm going to talk to you about an NIH-led initiative called the Adopt Core Measures Program, which is one effort to pursue personalized or targeted therapeutics. So I'll begin with an NIH working group that was held in 2014 on weight loss maintenance. This involved a number of different institutes from NIH. I worked with Rena Wing on this. We brought a number of different researchers together. You can see the range of expertise here. And essentially, we asked this group of individuals to address two questions. What are the barriers to successful weight loss maintenance, and what challenges do we face in developing better strategies? Well, we soon found that everyone disagreed, and this discussion was going to be a lot harder than we were expecting. And in fact, we really had to go back to the basics to frame the discussion in a very simplistic way. And that is discussing the pressures that affect body weight. There's biology, the genetic and epigenetic predisposition and the metabolic homeostatic system that it sets up to control body weight. There are environmental pressures on food composition and availability, our need for exercise, the social and cultural expectations that we face. And then there are behavioral choices that we make, stairs versus the elevator, the type of food that we eat, and the choice of friends and activities that we have. These pressures come together, they interact with one another, and ultimately they dictate a steady state weight that your body likes to be at. Everybody in this room is at a different body weight and body composition because we're subjected to different biological, environmental, and behavioral pressures. Mediating our behavior and its interaction with biology and environment, there's a complex psychology that has been the subject of great research over the past several decades. So, these are the pressures that affect body weight. It won't surprise you that the barriers to successful weight loss lie in these three barriers. And the first is that when we go on a diet and we lose weight, there's a complex set of adaptations in all the tissues of the body that culminate in an elevated appetite and suppressed energy metabolism. These adaptations are strong, redundant, and coordinating a number of different things in a number of different tissues. This regulation extends to food reward systems, making food more palatable and more rewarding. And it may also extend to our motivation to be physically active. These adaptations are persistent. They don't resolve with time, and they may even strengthen with the time in weight maintenance. The second barrier is a persistent obesogenic environment that promotes poor nutritional choices and low levels of physical activity. This can be seen in a number of different aspects of the environment in which we live. And the idea here is that this environment is so overwhelming that our attempts to change behavior and sustain those behavioral changes is just too difficult. The third barrier is that there is a very predictable decline in adherence in the behavioral programs when we implement them. This happens at around 6 months. It coincides with weight plateau, and it doesn't matter what program or what diet you're on. People eventually go off of their diet. It happens with diet and exercise. It even happens with drugs. This decline in adherence happens very gradually and intermittently. It's very difficult to study. But it's obviously rooted in the psychosocial and psychobiological aspects of behavior change. The ideas that emerged were that weight loss strategies are viewed as transient endeavors. Once I lose the weight, I'm good to go. Second, perceived cost-benefit ratio changes when people have to work so hard just to maintain. They're not seeing their weight change. Boredom and the return of entrenched habits can also be contributing factors here. So those were the barriers rooted in biology, behavior, and environment. What are the challenges that we face in developing better strategies? Well, the biggest one that emerged was individual variability. That is rooted in our biology, our behavior, and our environment. This individual variability manifests in our predisposition for obesity, in how our bodies adapt to our attempts at losing weight, the motivations behind our behavior change and our ability to sustain them, and in our environment. But the bottom line is all of this, in a very complicated way, translates into individual variability in the response to obesity treatments, regardless of whether it's a diet, drug, surgery, or other behavioral interventions. This is what individual weight loss curves look like. On the graph here, it's percent weight loss here, and you can see some people, when they go on a program, they actually gain weight. Some people do really well. There are responders and non-responders. This is lifestyle modifications alone. But we see that with pharmacotherapy as well, and with diets. Here, a low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet shown in a different way. A high amount of variability in the response to treatment. Orlistat plus a low-fat, reduced-calorie diet. We see it with exercise, we see it with surgery, we see it with pharmacotherapy. It happens in all these treatments. So, stemming from that first NIH workshop, in order to advance the science, we got together and said, well, we really have to pursue this individual variability if we're going to have any success in the future with obesity treatments. This effort is acknowledging the responder-non-responder phenomenon and targets and has the long-term goal of targeting specific treatments to those responders and not wasting time targeting treatments that we know people won't respond to. So the long-range goal, the long-term goal of this, is targeted or personalized treatment in obesity medicine. And this engages diet, exercise, pharmacotherapy, surgery, and other behavioral programs in the discussion. There's a great demand for this effort, as Cindy pointed out. NIH is very interested in it, but in obesity, our patients are demanding this. There's too many programs. There's too much misinformation. They don't know what diet or program is going to be best for them. Our clinicians are asking for it. they're using trial and error, and it's frustrating and expensive, and they feel inadequate when they're going to their patients and not knowing what exactly to prescribe. Many clinicians are actually doing this on an intuitive basis based on personal experience, but right now we have no way of leveraging their wealth and knowledge to the broader clinical enterprise in an evidence-based way. And then finally, our scientific community is actually pursuing this right now anyway. We have found some predictors of treatment outcomes, but the problem is that our studies are too limited in scope. They focus on one of those domains, and they don't really investigate the interaction between the different domains affecting body weight. So we initiated this with an NIH working group in May of 2016. I led this with Alex Rothman at the University of Minnesota, and you can see the program staff at NIH that were involved with this. This effort eventually became known as the Adopt Core Measures Project, accumulating data to optimally predict obesity treatment. And we focused on adult obesity because ECHO was already working on the pediatric population, and there's a lot of differences between adults and pediatric obesity. So here's the long-term vision. There's lots of important constructs and parameters in biology, in behavior, in psychosocial, and in environmental domains that may be predictors for treatment outcomes. If we measure these parameters, that will inform predictive algorithms that can then be used to target or personalize obesity treatments. The problem is that in order to get these targeted strategies, you have to have the algorithm. And in order to have the algorithm, you have to have the relevant measures of the predictors. And in order to get the relevant measures of the predictors, you have to know all of the good predictors and moderators of treatment outcomes. And that's where we're at. We don't know these predictors and moderators of treatment outcomes. So the short-term objective here is to develop a core set of high-priority measures that, from these representing these 4 domains, that when consistently used in studies, in weight loss studies, will identify constructs and parameters that predict or moderate treatment responses. Now, to this panel, we recruited 43 scientists, academicians from representing 19 different universities and 5 centers and institutes from the National Institute of Health. We paired academic researchers with program staff at NIH to curate this list. In the biological domain, you'll see that the academic folks on the left and the NIH folks on the right. But we focused in the biological domain on genetics, the regulation of energy homeostasis, learning, memory, and reward, cognitive function, exercise response, and diet response, and variability. In the behavioral domain, this was specifically focused on behaviors, not what regulates behavior, but the behaviors themselves. And so these folks focused on food eating behavior, physical activity behaviors, and sleep behaviors. In the psychosocial domain, their areas of emphasis were personality, dispositional traits, social cognitive aspects, affect, mood, stress, executive function, and our ability to self-regulate. And then in the environmental domain, we divided and conquered with the approach of looking at food environment, activity environment, social environment, and the neighborhood socioeconomic status. And then we added some perspectives that provided input on all 4 domains, and this was the people who had experience with the variability in pharmacotherapy, surgery, behavioral and dietary interventions, and then somebody that knew a little bit about complex data modeling. So we told the panel members we want them to prioritize the best constructs that could be predictors or moderators of treatment response, and prioritize then the best measure for those constructs that could be used in weight loss trials. And what I mean by best is a number of things. Panel members looked at the strength and source of the evidence, the relevance to obesity-related outcomes, those with weight loss maintenance. They looked at the quality of the measure and the feasibility of the measure with respect to its cost and the required expertise, and the type of burden that it would place upon the subject or participant. The expected products from this effort is a core set of high-priority list of constructs and measures based upon what we currently know in the state of science today, but we needed to develop it in a way that it was modifiable and it could change as the science advances. And we needed, because even though we got a lot of people, 43 people, they didn't know everything and they didn't want to dictate this for the entire community. And so we really needed a way to crowdsource and get input and feedback from the scientific community. We needed an online database of measure protocols that could be used as a resource by the scientific community for consistency in its application. And then we wanted to identify gaps in knowledge in the process, better constructs, measures, measurement schedules, more helpful study designs, and a roadmap for the future application. The website that we used was the grid-enabled measure database that is administered by the National Cancer Institute. You can see it has places for constructs and measures. We have 4 workspaces representing the 4 domains. This is publicly available. You can go to this website and look at the measures. Of the measures of these 4 domains, you can see biology, 29, behavior, 46, psychosocial, 129, environment, 34. Now, I'm not going to go into the list in detail. We just don't have time, but I will reflect on what came out of these 4 domains. This is essentially a draft of this list. And for the biological domain, we generally had good constructs, good measures, and really there was already some evidence of some predictive potential for some of these factors. We lacked in areas of psychobiology and peripheral metabolism, and the fact that these things require a higher expense and level expertise. In the behavioral domain, we generally had good constructs, and we had okay measures. Some measures actually would address a couple of different constructs that we had that were important. The big problem in this domain is that we don't have a really good way of measuring food intake in the free living environment. The psychosocial domain was a really difficult domain. You remember, we had 29 measures put up for consideration in this curation process. The predictive potential here is really questionable for specific measures, and what came out of this was the needed work into define constructs better and a better way to figure out which ones are the most important with related to obesity outcomes. The final domain is the environmental, and we have good constructs, good measures. The problem with this domain is there's a paucity of research linking these measures to obesity outcomes. And that's really, I mean, most of these outcomes you can really grab if you know the home address. And so that's where the work needs to be done there. So we're going to have a follow-up meeting next month and the final curation of the core measures and lists. We'll hone and merge the lists. We're going to develop the website and then identify gaps and problems. And we'll probably be publishing this in a dissemination plan over the next year. Now, I'll just finish up with a few perspectives. You know, we're not delusional people. We know that this is actually a really hard thing to do. And we don't know what we're going to get until we get there. It's challenging, complicated, and difficult. The need to fill this gap is great from a number of perspectives because the payoff for obesity therapeutics could be substantial. We don't know how valuable this will be unless we try and take this first step. So I'll end there.